Hello, I'm Dr. Scott Wadier.
And I'm Tommy Welling, and you're listening to the Fasting for Life podcast.
This podcast is about using fasting as a tool to regain your health, achieve ultimate wellness, and live the life you truly deserve.
Each episode is a short conversation on a single topic with immediate actionable steps. We cover everything from fat loss and health and wellness to the science of lifestyle design.
We started Fasting for Life because of how fasting has transformed our lives, and we hope to share the tools that we have learned along the way. Hey everyone, welcome to the Fasting for Life podcast. My name is Dr. Scott Wadier, and I'm here, as always, with my good friend and colleague, Tommy Welling. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Hey, Scott, how are you?
Fantastic, my friend. Excited for today's conversation. We are going to dive deep into an article that we came across, and it was titled "Time-Restricted Eating for Metabolic Syndrome?" I'm unimpressed. So we went and we grabbed the actual article that is being discussed. That is Time-Restricted Eating in Adults with Metabolic Syndrome, a randomized controlled trial. And it was an article that came out just in, October of this year. So we're talking like brand spanking new, hot off the presses. Mm-hmm. And we found a lot to be impressed. So we're going to dive deep into what metabolic syndrome is, how it can be reversed with time-restricted eating, dare we say baby time-restricted eating, which was kind of the starting point of their fasting windows. When we dive into it, we'll explain what that means. And I'm really excited because there's a lot of promise. And I am impressed of what we can do with the powers of fasting as a tool in our health and weight loss journeys. So if you are new to the podcast, welcome into today's episode. If you want to know more about Tommy, about myself, about how fasting transformed our lives, please head back to episode 1. Give it a listen. About 30 minutes, you'll read our mail. You'll know everything we did with fasting and how it helped us. And ultimately why we do what we do and why we have the challenges that are coming up here, and why we have our coaching and why we have our resources and why we continue to look for different ways to have conversations around adopting habit and lifestyle change. We truly believe that fasting can be an incredibly powerful tool for anyone in terms of weight loss and health. If you're a long-term listener, thank you again for being on this journey with us. So Tommy, I'm going to tee this up to you. Mm-hmm. And so time-restricted eating for metabolic syndrome. I'm unimpressed.
I mean, what a loaded title right there, because if we think about the where we're normally coming from as far as time-restricted eating, we're usually looking to make some improvements. I don't know of anybody who just kind of stumbles, accidentally starts time-restricted eating in a consistent manner without an end goal in mind. That might be, hey, I want to make some improvements on my blood work. I want to, drop a little long-term fat. I want to kind of break some of my cycles with emotional eating and all of these kind of things, or just kind of break the diet, roller coaster, maybe get away from tracking macros and calories so I can kind of simplify the equation for myself. Any number of these things or any combination of them can be great reasons to come into fasting and time-restricted eating and time-restricted feeding. But when we look at an article like this, let's say the original research article here, they kind of define a group, about 100 patients, I think it was 108, that had some level of metabolic syndrome. And they needed at least 3 of the 5 criteria: elevated waist circumference, elevated triglycerides, elevated blood pressure, low HDL cholesterol, or elevated fasting blood glucose. So, you're looking at a patient population here, which most of us, the majority of us, are going to fall somewhere in those, at least having 1 or 2 of those things, if not more, and potentially meeting the qualifications for quote unquote metabolic syndrome, some level of it. They didn't define obesity or some certain level of being overweight. So weight wasn't an exclusion criteria here, which is good because we can look at these things in the blood work as kind of earlier markers, and which may or may not be correlated with weight. A lot of times, a lot of us will have extra weight when we have these things too, but not everybody. And so that's a really cool thing that I like that they included in this, because a lot of times someone will have to be substantially overweight or maybe even obese to get into a study like this, or have diabetes. And so that wasn't the case for this study. So we really are looking at very generalizable, kind of patient population, which I think is a good thing.
And I love that it's a randomized controlled trial. Like you said, 108 folks. We'll kind of explain the situation and talk about a few of the things. But why metabolic syndrome? Why is it important? Well, that's the risk factors that increase the likelihood of developing heart disease, diabetes, stroke, and other health problems. It really is the precursor, or like the first, I don't want to say first stages of, but it's a lifestyle disease, right? So when we're looking at metabolic syndrome, I mean, there's 1 in 3 Americans, about 100 million people or more, right? Millions of folks that are undiagnosed pre-diabetics. It's a syndrome of insulin resistance and visceral adiposity, so that central weight distribution that we talk about. And it's fundamentally a lifestyle issue. So there's a direct line between our dietary habits, the carbohydrate-rich, highly processed, ultra-processed, highly convenient food supply, right, that we currently have. So
and meal timing as well. That's part of the lifestyle. Meal timing and frequency. That's a big part of it that doesn't get mentioned a lot of times. But that's where, on the flip side of that's why time restricted eating and time restricted feeding can be a big piece of the puzzle that can be helpful as far as these lifestyle factors.
So I love the author of the article, not the research article itself, but they were saying, well, lifestyle diseases require lifestyle interventions, but you know what? I'm not so sure anymore. And I'm like, man, at the end of this conversation, I'm really sure.
Yeah, right.
Like, I'm really, really sure.
Yeah.
So when we talk about the article itself, this is the article name, and you can find all the stuff in the show notes, is The Time Restricted Eating in Adults with Metabolic Syndrome, a Randomized Controlled Trial. Right. So we talk about metabolic syndrome. They had to have at least 3 of the risk factors, right? So they used the increased waist circumference. We just did a podcast recently on BRI versus BMI and waist to height ratio and waist circumference and how it's an indicator of insulin resistance.
Yeah, so helpful.
And ultimately future metabolic syndrome, et cetera. So love that they included that. Blood pressure, cholesterol levels, those 3 of those 5 for metabolic syndrome needed to be included to be part of the study. And then the time-restricted eating component without calorie counting, which preach. I love this because so many of us have skeletons in our diet and weight loss closet over the years of trying to lose weight and get healthy that we've sworn off calorie counting and macro tracking. And I feel like there is a time and place for it, periodically checking in, but it is not part of my long-term strategy. It is for a small subset of folks. It works. So I love that this speaks to what we talk about with Fasting for Life, is simplifying the equation. So this TRE approach, which we'll call it baby fasting, or starter's guide to fasting, when we look at the total time that they fasted, I'll have you share that in just a second. We've done a whole host of studies on this podcast about how the labs moved with or without weight loss, right? So this one's really cool because what TRE actually showed when compared to the standard of care nutritional counseling. So that whole lifestyle disease needs lifestyle interventions. And we're kind of pushing back on that a little bit, is, the standard of care group versus the TRE group, Tommy. So if we can unpack that, then we'll get into the cool results that we saw.
Yeah. So when we talk, let's talk baseline for a second here. So everyone went through kind of a baseline period where they were using an eating window of about 14 hours a day. So, that would be quote unquote a 10-hour fasting window, which is essentially, your overnight period, plus or minus, 1 or 2 hours. So maybe from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., you could be eating within that time period, about 14 hours a day. And most people fell within that group. There were, some people who didn't quite hit the mark, but I mean, that's that's what most people are just going to naturally, kind of do, unless you're just, eating all the way up until bedtime, and then first thing, right when you wake
Well, they
up.
were just simply asked to shorten their window by 4 hours, right?
Yeah, from the baseline period.
Yeah.
And then they were meant to go from there to about a 10-hour, somewhere between an 8 and a 10-hour window. And most people are going to fall more towards the 10-hour window. And so then you have 14 hours of fasting, 10 hours of nutrition, which,
so a 14-10 split up to a 16-8 split.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And, so it could be as much as, let's say, from 10 a.m. all the way up until 8 p.m. So we have like a late breakfast, early lunch. There could still be 4, 5, 6 nutrition opportunities, or times that you could potentially eat during that time. So that's a very wide range, and they weren't counting calories. So there is a lot of room for error, I would say. But at the same time, if it's being deliberately compartmentalized, that's usually a win for most people, depending on where you're starting from. But if you're starting from not fasting into any sort of fasting, usually you're going to see some improvement there. But then the baseline, the standard of care, folks were not told to compartmentalize their nutrition times at all beyond that.
So they just got the same nutritional counseling.
Yeah, without counting calories or anything else like that. They were told basically not to make any substantial changes. No need for that. No need to deliberately make any changes, but come to the nutrition, advice section, so we can talk over different topics, and then just basic nutritional education, which tends to now involve things like macronutrients and some form of timing of certain things, like eating late is going to be bad for blood sugar, or eating first thing in the morning is going to be, it's easier to process food that's eaten earlier in the day versus later in the day. And then some lifestyle kind of things like sleep could be involved, some low intensity exercise like walking and things like that, just general nutrition education and general health education. And this all spanned out over a period of 3 months for both groups too.
Yeah, this is a 12-week study, which I liked. And then when we get into the results, it makes sense for what we're seeing. So what I just heard there in terms of control group or the standard of care group versus the TRE group, which is the 8 to 10 hour or 14, 10 or 16, 8 fasting group, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So there was general lifestyle and dietary advice that would be typically recommended for people with metabolic syndrome. Mm-hmm. Right. So balanced diet choices, regular physical activity,
easy on the sugar.
Yeah. Recommendations for, managing your blood pressure and cholesterol levels. So low fat, high carb,
cut down on the sodium.
Yeah. Cut down your sodium, general food pyramid type stuff. You can hear the tone in my voice right now. So, but they were not required to adhere to any specific time restricted eating window. So when we say baby fasting, we're not meaning that to be dismissive. We're saying that you're wading into the waters of actually fasting.
Sure.
Right. So 14 hours is a great start. 16 hours is awesome. 18 hours is better. 20 hours, 24 hours, 36 hours. If you're looking for guidance on that, we have a blueprint to fasting for fat loss, 20-page PDF, gives you ramp ups, talks about the who, what, when, where, and why we recommend what we do, gives you some weekly examples that you can use. But specifically for this study, when we were looking at the original article where it was like, man, I'm kind of unimpressed. I love the fact that if we're looking at the main disappointment here from the other side of the aisle, right? Mm-hmm. For when they were saying, really was hoping for more. Right. Oh, okay. The change that we saw in A1C over 3 months was minimal. It was 0.1 percentage points.
0.1. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's okay. I would rather see that than a 0 or obviously for, versus an increase in it. But to see some directional improvement is nice. But at the same time, would it be worth time restricted eating if that was the only benefit, across a 3-month period of time? It would be fairly easy to make an argument that wouldn't be worth like major lifestyle overhaul kind of stuff.
Right.
But the difference between these two groups was just over 4 hours. So the standard of care group ended up still with about 13 hours and 54 minutes for the average fasting duration, and then the TRE group ended up with just about 9 hours and 45 minutes. So you had about just over 4 hours difference there. So to compare those with like basically close to zero change on the A1C for the standard of care versus a minus 0.1 on the time restricted eating, that's a benefit, but albeit not a very big one. But it was cool to see that over 90 days that you had over double the weight loss as far as the time restricted eating goes versus the standard of care. So you were at somewhere around 7 pounds in the time restricted eating versus right around 3 pounds in the standard of care. But it was very, very cool to see BMI, body fat, but big difference in body fat, which was really cool. You probably had somewhere around 5 times as much of the weight loss being body fat in the time restricted eating group versus the standard of care group. I mean, and that's huge, and that's not talked about or highlighted, in this editorial about the actual research findings. And you see the same where you see a big change in LDL cholesterol as well, where you have some substantial changes there too. So there are a lot of encouraging results here. And just the fact that we're kind of wading into the water and seeing some substantial differences over a 90-day period, this would absolutely be worth compartmentalizing. If I was just brand new to fasting and I was like, okay, well, let's make an argument. Should I try this or should I not try this? I see a lot of arrows pointing in the right directions here that it would be worth this change for 4-hour compartmentalization here to get these results.
Yeah, 100%. So weight change in both groups, right? Double plus more in the time restricted eating group. Outcomes, BMI better, 3.5% better. Body fat better, right? 3.5% improvement. LDL cholesterol, 8.5% improvement. Muscle mass, loss of muscle mass.
Yeah, half as much. Incredible.
I'm impressed.
There, you're protecting your metabolic flexibility. You're keeping a higher basal metabolic rate by protecting more of that muscle mass. Now we know fasting is going to be protective of muscle mass, growth hormone, adrenaline. You have physiological processes that help protect your muscle mass when not only are you restricting calories in kind of an uncontrolled way, but you're compartmentalizing the time, which means that you're actually compartmentalizing the insulin response, not just the calories being brought in.
Yeah, and specifically, there was some changes in the insulin sensitivity component, which we saw. The visceral fat we mentioned, like that's the one we want to see changes in. The changes in the profile. There was inflammatory markers that improved. So overall, one of those TRE studies where we go, heck yeah, that's what I'm talking about, right? Like that's exactly what I want. So, even in the article, the editorial, it's, looking at this trial, examining whether relatively straightforward lifestyle intervention would move the needle for metabolic syndrome. And the data, honestly, is not very compelling for that. And that's why we see fasting as such a powerful tool to move the needle, not just from a scale perspective, right? But from a metric lab metric, a blood work, a physiology perspective, in the world of, Ozempics and surgeries and the done to you type weight loss procedures, when we're looking at obesity, it is not a one cause, one effect, one solution problem. But if we have a tool that addresses so many things, all in a simplified way, right? Like, man, that is going to be powerful, and that's what we hear and see from so many of the testimonials we share on the podcast, so many of the testimonials we have from our challenges and from our coaching group. And we just had another one come in today, a woman who's working on maintenance. So she's lost all the weight.
Yeah.
And she's been in coaching with us and in our group coaching program, and in our VIP experience. And, we were able to see an actual intake survey that showed the score at the end was a -2. So she was 2 pounds below her goal weight and maintaining it.
Amazing.
Like, that's what I'm talking about. And reversed autoimmune issues.
Yeah.
And reversed blood sugar issues.
Wow.
And like reversed, what are some of the things I can't even think about right now? My mind just went blank. Reversed thyroid issues.
Wow. Yeah.
Hormone imbalances. So
amazing.
I'm sorry, sir, but I am very impressed.
I mean,
right? Go ahead.
I was going to say there were a grouping towards the end. They talked about a grouping of metabolic syndromes, and if you met the criteria or not, right? If you had 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 of the check boxes, and what happened to the different groups? What happened to the time restricted eating groups? And when I went to look at this chart, I was expecting, based on those directional lines, that time restricted feeding or time restricted eating would have crushed the standard of care. But what you notice is if you go to the standard of care, they actually had a few more people go below the criteria to meet the criteria for metabolic syndrome, like have less than 3 of those check boxes after the intervention over the 3 months. And so I started thinking about that, like, how is that possible that you don't move the needle physiologically, but then at the same time, at the end, the outcomes, they're not quite matching up. And so looking at the 5 things, there's different ways to affect what's going on here. You had the elevated waist circumference, which I don't think moved the needle very much on the standard of care. You had the fasting triglycerides, which probably didn't move much either. You had blood pressure, which could be affected somewhat through nutritional counseling. So that one could have moved a little bit. Low HDL, maybe a little bit as well, but elevated fasting blood glucose, I think, is probably the one that nutritional advice and education, you can do more with that one without also adding time restricted feeding. So my guess is that more people improved on that measure alone, which that measure alone could also be brought in to the time restricted eating to supercharge it, to turbocharge the results. And so I'd like to see this put together. And I mean, just the fact that you have one group that's actually time restricted eating, you have another one that's just quote unquote nutritional education. But if we put the two together, I would love to see what those results would look like with with that patient group, and how many could fall under that threshold at that point, because absolutely, I think it would supercharge those results.
Right. And so at the end of the article, there's a question, if the author's left wondering if there's nothing metabolically magical about TRE, which I'll plead our case that we just proved there is. Mm-hmm. If it just leads to weight loss by forcing people to consume less calories, then we need to acknowledge that we probably have better methods to achieve this same end. What say you? What are the better methods?
Yeah.
More complex, eat less, move more, calorie tracking, macro counting, like what are those methods?
Maybe it was the GLP-1s.
Yeah, maybe it could be. Maybe that's a short-term solution to a complex problem. I don't know. So I'm surprised, and this is why we want to have and go get the actual research article and look at the data and be like, man, this is powerful. So if you're just starting, or if you're fell off the wagon and you need to get back on track, right?
Yeah.
Right, with your fasting lifestyle and your lifestyle transformation.
Sure.
This should be this should be start with 14 hours.
Yeah.
Go grab the blueprint.
And then
if
go
you really
to 10.
want to accelerate, hop into the challenge. Let's go. We got a couple left this year. Do it. If you want to accelerate, get the fire hose experience, be in an incredible group with energy and encouragement. And the average weight loss is, shoot, man, the last one was about 8 pounds during our 7-day master your fasting challenge. Do it. Come on, let's go.
Let's go.
But there's a lot of power in, regardless of if we removed all of the positive stuff that we just mentioned, fasting simply simplifies your day-to-day life when
Sure.
it comes to trying to lose weight. So let's just start there. Let all this other stuff fall into place, right?
Yeah. And what about the fact that it was only 3 months here too?
Right.
So you had these arrows pointing in the right direction, having substantial results after 3 months. And so imagine if you just go back to whatever you were doing before. You uncompartmentalize your nutrition opportunities, your eating windows, right? Then a lot of those things just kind of fall back to where they were, because I go back to doing what I was doing before, so I get the same results as what I was doing before. But also imagine if I continue doing the same things, whether or not you continue to ramp up the fast, maybe go with a little bit longer fast, maybe sprinkle some of those in, so your eating window is a little bit shorter, right? And you might see even more better results. But what if you just continue doing just like this? I mean, it's very likely that the results continue to accumulate over time as well. So unimpressed, like I'm very impressed and very optimistic about what happens when you continue this timeline and this trajectory out right here. So I love this article.
Yeah,
I love
absolutely.
I love the conversation behind why it might have looked unimpressive to someone at first glance, but then also just the study behind it. Because like every one of these studies kind of takes a little bit different angle and then applies to everybody in kind of a different way, because everybody has, different lifestyle factors that they're dealing with too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's the majority of the stuff we talk about is how to make it a lifestyle and not make it a diet, not make it an on-off roller coaster type experience when it comes to your health and your weight loss journey, right?
Not 90 days on and then cut it off, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I ran my marathon. I guess I won't walk to the car. I won't take another step ever. No, like,
yeah, I hate steps now.
Yeah. This is the part of the process that nobody likes to talk about, which is why I love to highlight Cindy and her, her -2 on the submission, right?
Congrats, Cindy.
She's 2 pounds post her goal. All right, cool. That's amazing. Now let's work on sustaining it, right? Yeah. Let's work on that piece of lifestyle transformation, of identity shifts, of core values that have changed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I absolutely love it. So powerful article. Love the conversation, Tom. If you're looking for more guidance, head to the show notes, click the links, the research articles, the blueprint to fasting for fat loss, the link to sign up for the next challenge are all there, ready and waiting for you. Tommy, as always, man, I appreciate the conversation, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you. Bye.
So, you've heard today's episode, and you may be wondering, where do I start? Head on over to thefastingforlife.com and sign up for our newsletter, where you'll receive fasting tips and strategies to maximize results and fit fasting into your day-to-day life.
While you're there, download your free Fast Start guide to get started today. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Fasting for Life.